Welcome to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. I'm so glad you're all with me today because it's a time of year when there's been a lot going on in all of 2020, hasn't there? But right now, what everybody's talking about is the election. And on our show today, we are going to be talking with Ruth Weiss, an election expert, and she's going to give you the answers you need to know so that you can feel comfortable about voting. So stay with us. So, here at Change It Up Radio, as those of you who follow us know, we're all about dealing with change. We are dealing with change. We're trying to bring you information to make change smoother and more productive. And we also want to bring you change makers who are trying to make the world a better place. And we definitely have one of those people with us today in our guest, Ruth Weiss, who will be joining us shortly. Those of you who follow our show know that we often talk about the fact that change is inevitable. You know, it's going to happen whether we like it or not. It's probably the only sure thing in life is that change is going to come. We've been dealing with a lot of change since the pandemic began, since we were immersed in this election year. We've got civil unrest going on in our country. And I think it's been, for many of us, even an overload of change. There's a lot of overwhelm going on because there's much more happening than I think we were designed as humans to be dealing with. You know, I read recently that the human being was designed to be able to cope with what was going on in their own village and maybe about 10 miles outside of that village. Well, as you all know, these days we are, thanks to the internet, we are deluged with what's going on in every corner of the world every day. And it's a lot. It's really a lot, and it's causing stress. It's causing anxiety. It's causing overwhelm for a lot of people. And I think right on the top of the list of one of the big stressors right now is the upcoming elections. And I know myself, I I was envisioning myself having to take the entire day off on November 3rd because I thought the lines would be so long. I was planning to go to REI and buy one of those little fold up stools so I'd be able to sit if I got tired. I mean, it was like this whole planning thing that was going on because of all of the unknowns about the election. And then you start hearing things about, well, the mail ballots won't count, and the boxes, phony boxes are being put out by the Republicans, and all these things start flying around in terms of news. And whether it was true or not, nobody really knew. And that causes anxiety, that causes stress. So that's why today I decided we needed to talk about voting, because one of the reasons I created this show was because change is tough for humans. You know, we need it. It keeps us growing, it keeps us interested in life, but we hate the discomfort of the unfamiliar. And by the way, if you'd like to hear past shows where we talk about change in many, many different ways with many fabulous people, go to changeitupradio.com. That's changeitupradio.com. And if you'd like to know more about me or my work as an author, a speaker, a life transition coach, because I do have a private practice where I help people individually to deal with the ups and downs and the upheaval of change. You can get that information at paulashaw.com. But here on this show, my goal is to try to connect with you about the things that are concerning you, the things that are relevant in your life today. So, we've talked about the virus, we've talked about the changes that people are experiencing in the workplace, in the restaurants, in schools. We've looked at a lot of different kinds of change and how that change is impacting people. And it's really pretty much in everybody's face every day. Tonight we have debates. The last presidential debates will be happening this evening, and everybody is buzzing about that. And while I'm not going to talk about either candidate, I am going to talk about what I think is really important and something that's really disturbing me right now. And that is, I have been on this planet as of last month 70 years. And in my 70 years, I never remember so much division among the people in this country. When I was a little girl, if somebody would have said to me, who are you? I would have told them my name and said, I'm an American, because that was who I thought we all were. Whether you were a Democrat or a Republican, I don't remember that ever being as big a deal as it seems to be now. And I feel like that's been created by this administration that we've all been with in the last 4 years. And as recently, speaking to my parents about the whole election and the whole thing, I said, what I think if we look at everything you've ever taught me about God, about spirit, about the divine, what you've taught me is that is all about love. That is all about caring. That is all about community and helping others. It's not about fear. It's not about blame. It's not about dividedness. It's not about I'm right, you're wrong. He's good, she's bad. It's not about that. But I feel like we've lost that connection that we had. We had, it was different. I mean, I remember when I was young, the whole country was excited about the young John Kennedy and the children that were born in the White House, and his beautiful wife, Jackie, and how she entranced the people of Paris. Everybody was excited about that. And everybody was equally devastated when he was assassinated. And when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, I remember also everybody mourned together. It didn't matter what party anybody belonged to. And then there was Martin Luther King, who did so many amazing things to heal the wounds of racial diversion in this country. And then we lived through his assassination. So there have been some ups and some downs, but I remember when Reagan was president and Bush was president, it wasn't like everybody was going, oh no, not a Democrat, oh no, not a Republican, because we were Americans and there was a spirit of working together. And so I just ask you, when you're evaluating who you want to vote for, think about that. Who will unite this country? Who will help to heal the wounds? Who will really bring the divine back into the way we live our lives and the way we connect with each other? Who will help us be together again, to be Americans, to be one country again? Recently, I was watching a football game, and being a San Diegan, even though they abandoned us, I still loved the Chargers. And I was so thrilled to see that on their first game in SoFi Stadium there in LA, where they are now, they had this big banner up. And what they had on that banner were the words of LT, LaDainian Tomlinson, who, as many of you know, was a football great, and I think a human great. In fact, I was there in the stadium the day he broke all those records, and that made me a football nut extraordinaire. It was one of the most exciting days of my life. But this beautiful human being said something in his acceptance speech when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame that I thought was so beautiful. He said, "Let's choose to be for one another." I love that line. You know, so whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, you're an American. And I think if we would all shift into that attitude, let's choose to be for one another. Oh my goodness, that would heal so many things. That would take care of the race problems that we're looking at. That would take care of any other inequities. Because if instead of looking out for old number one here and prioritizing my money, my well-being, my this and that, if I woke up every morning and I said, what can I do for others today? How can I live my life so that it's fair for everybody in this country? And how can I live my life so that I'm also caring for the land that we live on in this country? If we can be for one another, if we can be for the earth, oh my goodness, what a difference that could make. So I say, let's all take a play out of the Chargers playbook and adopt that phrase. Let's choose to be for one another. And think about that when you're making your decisions about voting. Who stands for being about one another? Who cares about the masses, about the groups, the big groups? Ask yourself that question, and that's the candidate you want to vote for. Now, I began this segment by saying there's been a lot of angst about voting, and I told you I had my own angst about it for sure. And then I attended my Rotary group meeting, and a woman named Ruth Weiss spoke to the group. And she gave us such great information, such peace and such calm that I called her immediately and asked her to be on this show. And in the next segment, she will be joining us. So please stay with us because Ruth is going to give you the answers you need to know so that you can have peace and calm about election day, about voting. All right, we will be right back. And those of you Facebook viewers know that we aren't really going to a break right now. That'll all happen in the studio after I send this show in. So I am going to right now just get ready to bring Ruth on. All right, here we go. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. I'm excited about this segment of this show because somebody who I only recently came to know, but who brought incredible peace into my life is about to join us, and she's going to give us the answers we need about voting. So before I bring her on, let me tell you just a little bit about Ruth Weiss. She is a retired high school educator and a mentor teacher of 34 years. She began her work with the Election Integrity Project in February of 2011 as the San Diego County Coordinator. She served on the board of EIP from 2012 to 2017 and is co-founder and member of the board of Election Integrity Project California. She currently serves as that organization's vice president, director of legislative oversight, and director of education and training, while continuing to coordinate San Diego County. This is a very busy woman with a very big job, but thank God she's here. So Ruth, please join us because I am so excited about you being here today. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much.
It is such a joy to have you here with us today. Let me just switch us to, to that view. There we go. Ruth, I think it'd be a great idea for us to begin with having you tell us a bit about the Election Integrity Project.
Well, thank you very much, Paula. We are very excited about what we've accomplished. We are just about to complete our 10th year of operation. We have been all volunteer and people putting in hundreds and hundreds of hours to try to protect the electoral process in the state of California. The founders of the organization really got to sensing that there was something wrong. They were all independent. They didn't even know each other. And they all independently jumped into the depth of the electoral process to observe it and to find out whether their sense was correct, and they were horrified at what they saw. So they managed to come together at a national conference that they had all been attracted to, and they then met one another and said, we've got to do something in California, and the organization was born. And so we are now in our 10th year of working to try to restore California's electoral process and the integrity of it, and therefore restore the Republic of California. And then after we accomplish that, we're going to continue to work to defend that.
Beautiful. Now, was California different in that there seemed to be problems with the election process, or is that typical of many states?
I think there are a lot of states that are in trouble. We do know that nationwide, a lot of voter rolls are in trouble. And so, yeah, every state has its own challenges. But what people don't often understand is that because the Constitution gives elections over to the state as a purview, every state has its own way of doing it. And from state to state, the election codes and the way they do the elections are so different that it would be impossible to have a national organization that could get down into the trenches the way we do. So we focused on California because California was and is a mess. And that primarily is due to a disintegration of law and the protection of the voter by law, in that the California legislature has gone toward the idea of access, which is very important. Everyone who's eligible should have easy access to registering and voting, but they have established that at the expense of any kind of integrity. And we believe that both could be accomplished.
Wow. So, I don't want to create fear in people, but I want us to understand this because you're on the job and your group is there. So that's really a great thing. I think there's so much concern right now by so many people that there's going to be tampering with the voting and that sort of thing. So are you saying that that was possible or happening before? Or was it just like the technicalities of the way the voting was being done that was more of a problem?
No, in 2012, after we observed our first major election, we put out an extensive white paper report, which I think is still available on our website. And it was called California Opens the Doors to Election Corruption. And that's our problem, is that California's laws have opened the doors for people who want to do something wrong to walk in and be able to do it with impunity. I mean, practically impossible to even detect. And it's ridiculous. It's like going to the zoo and opening the doors to all the cages. And some of those animals will stay in their cages, and some of them are nice animals, won't hurt anybody even if they get out.
Right.
But we've opened the door to the bears and the tigers and the lions. And so they're all over the state. And believe me, if someone's scruples allow them to do something wrong, California's legal system allows it to happen. And that's what we're really concerned about.
Wow. So they were aware that this stuff was going on that was tampering with the voting, and they weren't doing anything about it?
Well, of course, I can't put intentions in other people's heads.
Right.
I can only look at the results. And it's hard for me to believe when they looked at those laws that they were passing, especially when people were speaking up and explaining to them why they were, maybe really bad ideas, and they ignored that and passed them anyway. It's hard for me to believe they somehow did not know the damage that they were doing. But so often politics comes into this, and you say, well, if this is going to be to my advantage, I'm going to go with it anyway. And so it's very frightening how the extent to which they have gone to open way too many doors.
One of the things you mentioned to me that I think is really important is that the Election Integrity Project is non-partisan. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, it was really important to us from the beginning to say, look, we want to bring people in from every political perspective that wants to be part of a unified thought that regardless of where you come down the political spectrum, elections should be fair and honest. That
Absolutely.
everybody who's eligible should be allowed to vote, but only once, and that people who are
Yes.
not eligible should be filtered out. And so we are a nonpartisan organization. We do not do our work with any particular candidate or anything in mind. We're not out there to make sure one person wins over the other. We are out there to make sure that the voice of the people wins, that the voice of the people is accurately heard without being diluted, without being canceled out, without, some sort of manipulation that can and always happen. It's as human as the first little election that any caveman may have held. People are flawed, and some people will do what it takes to win. And that's why we have laws, to make sure that those people can't get past the barrier. And California's laws have now opened those gates wide open.
Mm. You bring to mind a question. Do you know, Ruth, when the first elections in this country took place?
Well, I think in terms of the national election, was when we first elected our first president. But I don't know my history well enough to know, but I know that all the colonies had to select their leaders. They must have done some
Yes.
sort of electoral process. I just don't have the historical details for that.
But, I wasn't aware, Ruth, that the voting regulations vary in every state. Who determines that? The legislature of each individual state?
Correct. They pass the laws that become the election code in each state,
Ah,
and they go right down to the minutia of what the ballots have to look like. Even you'd be amazed when you read these laws. They tell you what font they have to be printed
oh my
in,
gosh.
what the relative size and things. So yes, but all of that is determined by legislative action within the state.
That is very surprising to me. And I didn't realize too that every state is passing laws in regards to how they're going to be doing their elections, and that those laws may not necessarily benefit the people. But that's part of what you're looking out for as the director of this overseeing the legislation, right?
Correct. Correct. We try to look at the laws that are being proposed,
Hmm.
and we try to find the ones that we think will either enhance election integrity or harm it. And
Hmm.
then we post letters of opposition or of support, and then we send a team to testify in the committee hearings and make our point of view heard. And of course, in California, it's very difficult because it's completely lopsided, and there's really no a variety of thought now in California's legislature, but we do our best.
Hmm.
And actually, two of the propositions that are now on the ballot for passing as constitutional amendments started in that fashion, and we opposed both of them on the perspective that they would really harm election integrity. And so now we'll see whether the people believe us or whether the people go a different way.
Ah, so tell me what an average day is like for you, because you're a very busy lady and you're taking part in a lot of the activities and what the election project oversees. So tell me what is an average day like for you?
During the election season, which is right now,
Yeah.
uh, being in charge of the statewide training, I'm always focused on that. So I'm doing a great deal of preparing the training, figuring out who's qualified to get into the training, because we have to collect paperwork from people, and then conducting the trainings. And so I'm busy 5, 6, 7 hours a day just focused on the training. And then I get a lot of calls to do media, radio, TV,
Mhm.
newspaper interviews, etc. In a non-election year, I do a great deal of speaking. I travel all throughout Southern California and speak to groups, try to educate them about the electoral process and make them more savvy voters. Um,
Mhm.
and I do a great deal of writing that is then published and sent out by the Election Integrity Project California. So we are busy both in an election year and a non-election year.
Boy,
I'm on
yes.
the board, so obviously we have board meetings and strategy to talk about. We are now in constant contact with our legal team, so that takes up a lot of time as well. So
Mhm.
yes, lots of stuff to do.
Boy, I'll say. Well, Ruth, we need to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's talk about the nitty-gritty of what's the safest way for people to vote this year. All right, we will be right back. Okay, and we don't really go to break, Ruth, because we'll be sending this show into the studio and they'll be putting the commercials in. So if you're ready, we'll just come on back.
Right on.
Thank you. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. I am talking with Ruth Weiss today. I'm having the hardest time with your beautiful name. Ruth Weiss is talking to us about voting. She is with the Election Integrity Project, and boy, they have a big job trying to make sure that elections are safe and fair for everyone. They're nonpartisan, and they're just out there trying to make sure that the people's voice is heard. And I am very excited about a group that's doing that, because I think the people are dealing with a lot of fear and anxiety right now, particularly over this election, whether their vote will count, where's the safe way to vote, where's a safe place to put it, will I be in line for hours on election day? So Ruth, let's deal with some of those questions. What do you feel is the safest thing and most effective thing for people to do in terms of voting this year?
We have always stood for voting in person. We believe that when someone goes to the polls on election day and votes in person, that is the least manipulatable ballot. And the reason is that you walk in, you mark your ballot, you put it in a sealed box. It goes in that sealed box straight to the counting center. It comes out of that sealed box and into the tabulator. There's really very little that anybody can do to manipulate your vote. But when you decide to go with the envelope ballot, as we call it, any ballot that you have to put into an envelope, regardless of how safely you turn it in, when it gets to the counting center, people think they just open it and count it, or somehow they think that it won't have to go through processing if they turn it in on election day, and that's really inaccurate. So what they do is they scan it and they sort it and they prepare it for verification, and then they verify signatures, and then they have to contact voters that they don't believe match the signature. And that's a real spot right there, that if somebody's signature is challenged and then that voter gets contacted, about 50% of the voters who could cure their signature and say, no, that was me, don't see that piece of mail that comes to them. They miss it, or they think it's junk mail. And so they could have had their ballot cured and counted, but they didn't respond. And so people are being disenfranchised all the time, and they don't know that because they don't know how important the signature is. They don't know how important it is to make sure that you don't sign carelessly, and then they don't watch for those mails to come to them. And then after, if you pass the signature verification, then the envelope is sliced open, it's extracted, and then it's minutely inspected. And this is something people don't know, that they go through. If a cookie crumb or a drop of spaghetti sauce or anything gets on that ballot, or if you've made a stray mark with your pen, that's going to mean that the ballot can't be counted accurately by the machine. So then all of those ballots go into another stack, and then a couple of people from the registrar's office will sit over in a corner and copy them over onto a blank ballot that goes through the machine on your behalf, but it's not the one you marked. And so in all of those different handlings and the hundreds of hands they go through, things can happen, mistakes can happen. And then, when these registrars have to hire hundreds of people that don't normally work for them, but they have to hire temps to expand, they don't know who they're getting. They can't vet them accurately enough. And there can be people who have, kind of infiltrated, and then there could be wrongdoing in there. And I just don't want to submit my vote to that process if I have the opportunity to vote in person. The absentee ballot is certainly really important for people who cannot make it to the polls for whatever reason. But everybody can vote just by mail just because they want to is part of the major ruination of the California integrity.
Because once you put that ballot in the mail, then it's much more subject to the things that you were just discussing.
Correctly.
Boy, I'm starting to feel a little bit badly that I didn't put mine in the mail, but I put it in an official box, and there were people overseeing the process and all that. So I felt safe doing it. But I realize what you're saying now, it isn't quite the same as if I stood in every year of my life that I've been eligible, I've always voted in person. But this year, as I mentioned earlier in the show, I was so concerned both about the people in COVID and also standing in lines for hours. But you mentioned something that at least that several counties in California are doing to try to alleviate the lines. And could you talk a little bit about the polls being open more than just on November 3rd?
Sure. There are 19 counties, very tiny ones in the north of California, that are going to just be status quo, but all the rest of the counties are going to have larger polling locations that will accommodate more people with social distancing, and they're going to have all of the protections in place, on steroids, believe me. And then they're going to be open multiple days so that you can go not only just on election day, but you can go starting on Halloween. That would be the latest that the polls in California would be open. So you go on Halloween or the 2 days after that, you're going to minimize the amount of time you're going to wait, because people are probably not going to spread themselves out as carefully as they should, because
Mhm.
this is a new thing. They're not used to, oh, okay, I can go early. But the
Exactly.
polls will be open for in-person voting starting Halloween all the way through Election Day. And if you go on one of the earlier days, you'll be very happy at your experience, I think. There are a few counties that will actually be open even longer than that. The vote center counties, there are 15 of them. Some of them are going to be open 5 days, and they can actually be open up to 11 days, which is their norm in a regular election
Really?
cycle that isn't impacted by COVID. So some of them have decided to continue that process and stay open 11 days. So everybody needs to check with their county and find out, what are we doing? When and where can I vote in person? And think about that. All you have to do is take your vote by mail ballot in and surrender it and say, I don't want to use this, so that they can cancel it. And that keeps you from
Oh,
voting twice,
I
and you
see.
can vote in person.
That is so good to know. I wish I had known that because I think that would have been my preference just for the safeguards that you're talking about. But I'll just have to cross my fingers that the process goes well. I think there's a lot of confusion, Ruth. If you mail in your ballot through the post office, when is it counted?
All of us have experienced getting mail in our box that doesn't belong to us, or getting something returned to us after it's been floating around in the mail service for 4 weeks or 4 months. I got a package back. It was just a manila envelope with a few papers in it that I had sent to someone. And I got it back 4 years later saying we
Oh,
couldn't deliver this.
oh my.
And it was addressed to someone in my own county. I don't have any, I still have that. You can't believe the postmark on this thing. And so we know things go wrong. The Postal Service, as wonderful as they are, and I'm amazed at how well they can get things where they need to go. But things happen, glitches happen. And what makes people believe that same thing can't happen with a ballot? Of course it will. And so if you put your ballot in the mail, things could happen. Chances are it will get there just fine. But once it does arrive, then it has to go through a whole series of processing, as I said before. And it usually takes 3 to 5 days for a ballot to get to the point where it's counted after it arrives.
Wow. And this has been true in every election. And yet, most elections, they declare a winner on November 3rd. How does that happen?
Well, the way it happens is that the ballots that come in before Election Day, and they have time to process them before Election Day, they are able to put them through the tabulator in advance, and no one can see what's in there. But at 8 o'clock on election night, they can push that button and release those first results. So the people who walked in and voted early, and the people who sent in their vote by mail ballots early, those are the results you see right off the bat. And then through the rest of the night, the results that are coming in are all the votes that were cast in person. And through the years, the media and the analysts have developed a formula, I guess is the best word, to determine if you've got 1% of the votes from here, we know how this group is going to vote. And they kind of figured it out. And so even with a very minor percentage of the votes in, they felt very confident in calling the races. And so
Oh,
they've been doing that over the years, and they've been right. However, the official results are not until 30 days after the election, and every vote is processed. That's when the results are official. And what we learned in 2018, which really flipped things when California instituted their ballot harvesting law, is that those formula no longer work. And so they called a lot of races according to their normal formula on election night in 2018, and found by 2 or 3 weeks later that they had been wrong, and these elections were overturned. People who were up 10, 12, 14 points on election night actually wound up losing their election, and it was all
wow.
due to the ballot harvesting thing. So I think they're going to be a great deal more cautious here in 2020, not going to call races quite as quickly. And so with the mountains of vote by mail ballots that will come in this year due to the fact that everyone was mailed one because of the COVID situation, people are going to have to be patient. We are not going to get our election results as quickly as we would like to get them.
So on November 3rd, what is the best we can know? What is the news media going to be able to tell us?
Very good question, because we also know that after the results may be released, then there are going to be legal challenges. This year is very intense, and we've got attorneys on both sides lined up to challenge things. I think you may have a pretty good sense of who your local elected officials will be.
Mhm.
So I think you can fairly well count on your mayors and your city councils and your boards of education. Those will pretty much be able to be called on election night in most cases, unless there's a really razor thin election.
Mhm.
But the federal offices, the congressional seats, the senatorial seats, certainly the presidency is going to be something that will require our patience to wait and see.
Boy, and that's going to be a tough one, because patience is what everybody doesn't have right now.
Well,
So we're going to take a little break here, Ruth. And when we come back, we'll finish up our discussion about the best way and the safest ways to vote this year. We'll be right back. All right, Ruth, if you're ready to go here, let me just check my notes real quick. Okay. All right. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw and my guest today, Ruth Weiss, who is Vice President and Director of Overseeing, and I can't remember the two areas, but one I know is legislation, legislative integrity, and training of people with the Election Integrity Project, which is a nonpartisan group that is completely created to help oversee that elections are safe and fair and honest and integrous, which I think is something we all want, hope for, and quite honestly, I thought was an fait accompli. And I'm very sorry to have learned that that's not necessarily the case. And so we need groups like the Election Integrity Project to make sure that we, the people, are actually fairly represented when we vote. So Ruth, welcome back. I'm so absolutely over the moon with excitement about the things you've been sharing with us. In our last segment, you mentioned a term that I'm not sure everyone understands clearly or accurately. So tell us a little bit about ballot harvesting.
ballot harvesting is a term other people want to soften it and call it ballot collecting, but it is the term that means that anybody can take a ballot from anybody else and turn it in on their behalf. Oh, that sounds good. You're helping people turn their ballots in, right? But what could go wrong? In most every other state in the union, ballot harvesting is completely illegal. In several
Oh,
states, it's actually a felony. We had an election overturned in North Carolina in the last electoral cycle because one of the candidates ballot harvested illegally, and it came to light, and they had to rehold that election all the way, and he didn't even run the second time around. So it is really nationwide considered to be quite a bad thing, and California decided to just legalize it. So in 2018, they passed the law and said, okay, you can now get anybody's ballot. It was always the case, and it still is in every other state, that if you have a vote by mail ballot or an absentee ballot and you are unable to turn it in yourself for whatever reason, that someone of your household or a close relative can sign the back of the ballot. You sign it and say, I'm authorizing this person to turn my ballot in. So you retain chain of custody. And that's what California removed. They said, no, now you can just grab anybody's in any number. There are no qualifications to be a ballot harvester. You can be a non-citizen, you can be underage, you can be anything. And it's legal to be paid to harvest ballots. The only restriction is they can't pay you per ballot, but they can pay you per hour or per week or whatever they want to harvest ballots. And that opens the door for vulnerable people to be either strong-armed or deceived. And so as people go around and represent themselves as, hey, I'm here to help you, who knows what they're really there to do. We had plenty of reports when they first started ballot harvesting of people who knocked on doors and were told by the voter, I'm not going to vote this year. I don't know much about anything. And they said, well, let me come in. I'll help you mark your ballot. And they actually marked the ballot for these people. And a lot of people aren't very assertive, and they feel that they can't say no, or they're just gullible and naive. We know a lot of pressure is now put on university students because the professors now have the opportunity to say, bring your ballot in, we're all going to mark them together, or dorms. We have vulnerable people who work for very oppressive unions who say, okay, union meeting, bring your ballot in, and we're going to collect them at the end of our meeting. Just all of these things actually did happen the first year with that we had ballot harvesting in 2018. It's so much more than a get out the vote. It's so much more than saying, we just want to make sure everybody votes. It's a great deal more than that. And it's causing a great deal of consternation in California. And the rest of the states are looking at us like we're completely out of our mind. Well, unfortunately, because so many states have kind of precipitously decided to make these emergency laws that are not well thought out and didn't go through public comment periods of time, they have turned over their normally cautious electoral process, and they've moved the California style in there. So like Nevada, for example, in the dark of night, suddenly legalized sending everybody a ballot, suddenly legalized ballot harvesting, suddenly took away a lot of the signature verification requirements. And so, and all in the name of COVID, which simply means that we're using this straw man to get away with a lot of things that nobody could fight. And there was even a lawsuit to try to stop that Nevada thing. And the decision came down that, well, it's kind of too late now because everybody's been told this is the way it's going to be. We can't pull back the reins. The timing was perfect. So I think that we need to take a look in retrospect when this election season is over and say, what have we done to ourselves? And how do we pull back on this? And how do we return some common sense laws that give integrity without infringing upon people's ease and ability to vote?
So let me ask you a question. If people just heard what you just said, like I did, and I think that sounds awful, and I would like to see that change in California, what can I do?
Since it was a legislative act, the only thing that can be done, well, there are two things. We can either put pressure on our legislators to say, we want this gone. And it would have to be a pretty concerted, consistent effort to talk to these people who thought it was a good idea, and really make it understood that the people of every political party really don't like what it's caused. Or you could get enough of a treasure chest to put a proposition on the ballot in the following election and have the people vote to overturn it.
I see. Wow. Oh my goodness. I had no idea California was the only state doing that. And I thought, from what I'd heard on the news, it seemed like ballot harvesting didn't sound like a good idea, but I feel so much clearer about it now, the way you explained it and the possible what can go wrong. What is the rationale? What did the people who were for it, or the legislators that passed it, what was their rationale?
Well, the stated rationale, the way they sold it, was to say it makes sure that everybody has every possibility of having their ballot turned in, and that we, go to the people who maybe don't quite know how to vote or can't make it from their front steps to their mailbox to put their ballot in their mailbox, that somehow we have to make sure that everybody votes. But what this really does is take away a really important freedom. I mean, this is a country where we have freedom, and freedom means that you can choose to participate, but equally you can choose not to. And ballot harvesting has really taken that choice away from a lot of people who are basically being forced to vote whether they want to or not. And that's wrong. People have the right to sit it out if they choose to. And that's basically what's happened, is it's taken that away. And of course, anybody who's ballot harvesting and has money behind it to do it, they're going to target. Okay,
Sure.
this is where I want to target. These are the people we want to target. This is the district we want to target. And it really kind of took a lot of people by surprise in 2018. And so electoral results in California were a great deal different than anyone anticipated as a result of that. I mean, just think about it. In Orange County alone, there were 250,000 of these harvested ballots that were dumped on the doorstep of the Registrar of Voters on election night.
Oh my God.
Unanticipated ballots that came in that had to be processed, and I don't want to deny any lawful person the right to vote. Absolutely, you should vote if you want to. You shouldn't be forced to vote, and you shouldn't be influenced beyond the realm of just watching the ads and listening to people talk. And that's what happens when you ballot harvest. So this year we have people who were caught by surprise last time in 2018 who are saying, well, if they're going to harvest, we're going to harvest. And so now everybody's harvesting in California.
No.
And so it's really quite a mess. And some people are trying to harvest according to the laws, according to the rules. And the rules are that you have to turn in every ballot you harvest, regardless of if you think it's going to go your way or not. The rules are that you have to turn those ballots in safely to the registrar's office within 3 days of collecting them. And the rules are that you're supposed to sign as the harvester and your relationship to the voter. But in that law, right after saying you got to sign the ballot, there was a sentence that said, but if the harvester doesn't sign, the ballot is still valid. So that means you don't have to sign.
Exactly.
And somebody can come in with 100 or 200 ballots, turn them in with no control over, where did you get these from, whom, were they legitimate or not? Now you add to it in this election the fact that with our very, very messed up voter rolls, we had everyone on those voter rolls mailed a vote by mail ballot, whether they asked for it or not. So there are over 500,000 ballots floating around out there that don't really have a legitimate recipient at the other end, because those people are either deceased or moved out of the state of California, and the voter rolls have not caught up with that. And all of those ballots are floating around, able to be scooped up and kept by harvesters to turn in for their own advantage. And they can even circumvent the signature verification by simply putting an X in the signature line and saying this person is in some way incapable of signing his own name. Then you just scribble in the witness line, and they never check the witness signature. It's just, okay, somebody witnessed that this is a real voter. You turn it in. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to cheat if you really want to be nefarious.
But Ruth, there's so much we could talk about, but we're running out of time. So let me have you, in conclusion, do two things. Give the website address of the election integrity process, and any last thoughts you have about what would be the safest, most productive way for people to vote.
My last thoughts: vote in person if you can and you feel comfortable and safe. If not, turn your ballot in safely the way that Paula did at a staff drop box or at the registrar's office, or some ballot harvester that you trust if you want to. But turn it in safely. Don't put it through the US mail, because too many things can go wrong. And I also want people to know that this is what I've been saying, which may sound very depressing and negative, is the reason to vote. Because if everybody with good conscience gets out there and participates, then the manipulation can be outvoted. So this is not the reason to say, oh, I'm going to crawl under rock, why bother? This is the reason to say, no, I'm going to fight back and I'm going to make sure my vote counts. I'm going to get it out there. And I love my motto, good friends don't let friends not vote. So get everybody else out there voting your conscience and we'll be fine. Our website is EIP, that stands for Election Integrity Project -CA for California.com. EIP-CA.com. And at our website, you can volunteer, you can donate, you can learn all kinds of things by reading what we have up there and looking at our content. And you can also visit the websites from our landing page of our other 3 organizations in Arizona, Nevada, and Arkansas.
Beautiful. Ruth, bless you for being with us today. Thank you for all the amazing information that you shared. And I love what you're standing for. And I think all of us are blessed and very fortunate that Election Integrity Project exists. Thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Paula. I look forward to everybody coming our direction.
All righty. And thank you to my listeners. Remember that you can hear us in San Diego at 9 o'clock on Sunday evening on AM 1170 and FM 96.1, The Answer. And we are on every major podcast platform. So please tell your friends about this show, share it with them, share it on Facebook, and tell them to listen to the podcast, because this information can really help them vote safely and effectively. All right, we look forward to being with you all again next week. Until then, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.